Richard Nixon served as vice president in the 50s and early 60s. Twice during that time, he received a startling phone call telling him to prepare to assume the presidency. The then sitting president, Dwight Eisenhower, suffered a heart attack in 1955 and a stroke in 1957. Eisenhower survived both health crises. If a president was to die, resign, or be removed from office after an impeachment, the Constitution was clear. The president's powers and duties would pass on to the vice president. But the Constitution wasn't so clear about what to do if the president was physically or mentally compromised, or if the office of the vice president somehow became vacant. The 25th Amendment, ratified in 1967, addresses these issues. Here's what the 25th Amendment establishes. If there is a vacancy in the vice presidency position, the president gets to nominate a replacement. That replacement only gets the vice president job if both houses of Congress confirm that nominee by a majority vote. Nixon's own vice president, Spiro Agnew, was implicated in a corruption scandal. He resigned in 1973. It was through the 25th Amendment's process that Gerald Ford became vice president. But what about the president being physically or mentally unable to perform the duties of the office? Well, if it's the president who consciously and knowingly determines that this is the case, the president can temporarily step down. To do so, the president must first declare this in writing to two leaders in Congress, the Speaker of the House of Representatives and the President pro tem of the Senate. The vice president then may exercise the powers and duties of the chief executive. The vice president becomes acting president. This ends when the president who has stepped down declares to those same two leaders in Congress that he or she is willing and able to resume the office. But what if the president isn't of sound body or isn't of sound mind? What if the president is not able to determine that stepping down is the appropriate action to take? Well, in that scenario, the Constitution allows others in the executive branch of our government to force the president to step down. Those whom the 25th Amendment so empowers are the vice president and, as is current law, a majority of the 15 executive department heads. And they can force the president to step down through a relatively simple procedure. All that is required to strip the sitting president of the office's powers and duties is for these other executive branch officers to formally write the Speaker of the House and the President pro tem of the Senate. Afterwards, the vice president becomes acting president. The president, however, can contest this. The president can resume the office's powers and duties by writing those same two congressional leaders and asserting that no compromising disability exists. The 25th Amendment provides that the vice president and cabinet officers can take a further step to prevent a compromised president from retaking authority. The issue would come before Congress, and a supermajority, or 2/3 vote, in both the House and the Senate would be required to stop the president from reassuming the powers and duties of the office. The 25th Amendment has one last vital thing to teach us, namely that the framers, those who conceived of and drafted the Constitution, weren't perfect, and they knew they weren't. Which is why they designed the Constitution's Article 5, which gives us processes for amending the Constitution. Americans have from time to time wrestled with provisions in the supreme law of the land that lack clarity. Sometimes we are forced to go back and update the Constitution, and the 25th Amendment is case in point. Before the 25th Amendment's ratification in 1967, the Constitution actually left some lingering doubt about presidential successions. After a vacancy in the nation's top office, was the vice president supposed to legitimately become the new president? Or just act in the president's stead until the next election? This gloom of uncertainty particularly beleaguered 10th President John Tyler. He succeeded to the post after the early and untimely death of William Henry Harrison. Harrison caught pneumonia on his inauguration day and died 31 days into his term. President Tyler's many critics called him not His Excellency, but His Accidency. Regardless, the 25th Amendment cleared up the controversy once and for all. It affirms that presidential successions are full and official.